Okay.
So I'm David Durfee. I live in Shaftesbury. I represent Shaftesbury, Sunderland, and Glastonbury, and chairing the committee. And vice chair.
It's John Bartholomew, and I live in Heartland and also represent Windsor and West Windsor.
John O'Brien, I live in Tunbridge and also represent Royalton.
Ray Burke, Cabot, Cabot and Lake Beach.
Michelle Glassland, I live in Westminster and also represent Rockingham and Brookline.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1. I live in Stowe and I represent Stowe.
Richard Nelson, Orleans 1, which is the town of Derby where I live and represent, and all the dairy farmers and people that work the land.
And I'm Janet Hurley, the chair of the Land Use Review Board.
Kirsten Sultan, I'm a member of the board.
And Pete Gill, executive director of the board. Nice to see you all. Guess we'll get started with the presentation here. On to the next slide, just for a quick overview. We promised to come in and talk to you all about the Wood Products Manufacturers Report, which we will certainly do. We'll give the balance of time to Kirsten, who is the board lead on that. But a couple of quick things for a little extra cream on the top there for you guys. We've got a little bit of Act 250 background, let you know where the program's, how it's going. And then some updates on the implementation of Act 181 from Janet. Without further ado, Act 250 background. I know we've talked about this before, but it's always good to just level set so everybody has a good understanding of what we do as a program. Act 250 is the state permitting system. It ensures that development and subdivisions conform to these various 32 different criteria. You always hear the 10, but with all the sub criteria, we're talking about 32 different criteria that things are reviewed upon, ensuring that there's protections for agriculture for one, farmland, prime farmland, transportation, energy, natural resources protections, whole host of criteria that things are being reviewed under. When do you need a permit? When does Act 250 apply? Well, it depends on, the size of the parcel, the project type, and the location. There's a couple of different triggers. I've got those listed out there. So if you have 6 to 10 lots, that could trigger the need for an Act 250 permit. The reason it's 6/10 is if you have subdivision and zoning bylaws in your municipality, then you would qualify. It would be less stringent there, so it would be a larger size without review. You'll see that slash down on the third bullet there for commercial operations, 1-10 acres. So again, it expands if you have subdivision and zoning bylaws in your municipality. Another trigger there I skipped over was the 10 units. And then there's a whole host of other triggers within the statute, listed a couple of those there, but the main ones are the ones that I've highlighted. Of note and importance for this committee and others is the logging, farming and forestry exemptions below 2,500 feet do not require an Act 250 permit for those activities. There's also a number of housing exemptions, interim exemptions that came out of Act 181 that are in effect currently as well.
And just in case anybody is wondering, wood products manufacturing is not the same as forestry or forestry operations.
Yes, correct.
Kirsten will get into that a little bit later.
Here gives you a little bit of a map of how the state is divided from an Act 250 district's perspective. So, and this is a good point to remind you all too, like if you have questions about Act 250 that are coming, well, either from you or from your constituent basis, particularly if it's related to a particular project. We've got various districts and district coordinators and staff within those districts, and folks can reach out to them. We've got this map and the contact information on our webpage. But broad overview here, we've got now under Act 181, a land use review board that consists of 5 new members with a variety of expertise. They've been working really hard since January 27 of last year, when they first started, and they have not stopped. They are working really, really diligently and hard. We're really happy to have them as part of the program. They oversee the program as a whole. We also have district commissions. Those are the folks that are appointed by the governor, and they're the ones that are reviewing applications. So when a permit is needed, they're taking that in and reviewing that application and issuing permits with the help of our district coordinators, district technicians in our regional offices, helping those permits get out the door. As noted here, the district coordinators are also responsible for making determinations of whether an Act 250 permit is needed or not needed in any particular situation. This, just for your reference, is kind of our organizational chart. I'm not going to go into detail there, but you've got it in your materials. Some permitting by the numbers. These are old data. We're still getting our 2025 data shored up here, but initial indications, it's kind of in the range, within the same range. We issue about 350 to 400 permits per year. Very small percentage of those is denied, as you can see, 0.2%. And a fairly small amount are actually go to hearings. I think, as we've discussed before, there's two processes there. Well, really three. There's an administrative amendment for kind of record keeping purposes for permittees. And then there's a minors process whereby there's a notice period of a proposed permit that's going to be issued, opportunity for people to submit comments. And then there's what's called the major process, when an application is submitted and a hearing is going to be held on that matter. And as you can see, those going to majors about 5% plus or minus there.
Here's the, just only 0.2% are denied, but a larger number are appealed. So does that suggest that many of those appeals are successful? Or am I reading something else?
Yeah,
into this?
some are appeals of denials and some are appeals of the permit issued.
Yes.
Sometimes they
Appeals,
don't like a condition maybe,
Exactly.
or sometimes it's the neighbors.
a neighbor might appeal. Okay.
Yeah.
How many permits a year result from essentially are complaint driven? You know, because an individual or business, may say, I'm gonna do this, I know I need a 250 permit, but a certain amount might either be existing or somebody starts going forward thinking they don't need an Act 250 permit, and a neighbor says, wait a minute, you need an Act 250.
I don't have those statistics on
It's-
top of mind,
it's-
but
It's a regular occurrence,
it does happen.
Yeah, so.
but I don't think it's huge number.
Yeah, I mean, as you saw from the map, we have pretty good distribution of district offices. Those folks are open for calls anytime, whether somebody is interested in a particular project that you see going on, and understanding of whether that needs jurisdiction or not, or somebody's thinking about an operation that they've already started.
Kirsten might have she was district coordinator for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, so I live in Lyndonville and I worked as the district coordinator for the Northeast Kingdom region, District 7 of Act 250 for 19 years. For that, I was in the private sector. My background is in civil engineering. I was in consulting for about that length of time. And I mean, it runs the gamut. I mean, people call the Act 250 office. Sometimes it has nothing to do with Act 250 and it's referred elsewhere. People think of Act 250 as the catch-all. I guess I would say that the fact that someone's raising a question, whether it's a neighbor or a state agency contact or someone raising the question of applicability of a permit, doesn't change whether or not it applies. So that's not the element that typically brings it into Act 250. I think that's it's typically just kind of on its own face value. Sometimes that is the pathway, that is proper attention. But it, either it does or it doesn't. And so I wouldn't say that it's a
large
a
number.
large
Yeah.
number, right? But I don't have the data either.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you kind of infer from that last data point on the screen there too is 270 jurisdictional opinions. That's a pretty good number of jurisdictional opinions compared to the number of permits there, 400. plus or minus there. I think the numbers for 2025 are somewhere slightly lower than that, but within that ballpark. So people are reaching out and trying to understand whether they need a permit or not. And certainly that 270 is those that have reached out for an official determination of jurisdiction. Others are just coming through the process without necessarily needing that piece of paper.
So Christian, you would be involved then in those determinations, like you'd go out to a site and say, no, this is farming, you don't need an Act 250 permit?
Correct. When I was in the role of a district coordinator, that was part of my realm of responsibilities to make those determinations for different projects and inquiries and issue the jurisdictional opinion. But now that I'm on the board, I'm not in that role directly.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you. Want to open up a ball of wax? What about accessory on-farm structures?
We're gonna get to that a
Another
little.
day.
Well,
That's fine.
we're gonna be reporting to you on accessory on-farm businesses next month.
Great.
And so we'll save that one, Rep. Nelson.
Thank you.
So moving on here, just a few programmatic updates. We've received appropriations from you all to help some of these items on this list. We've been able to digitize a lot of our files. It's about 540 boxes of files this last year that have been started to be processed. And this just allows the public and as well as our staff to be able to access these existing permits, amendments going back for a very long time since the existence of the program in the different districts, and really makes it a more efficient process overall. So appreciate that. That's ongoing work that we're doing. We also received funding and positions for the expanded to expand our capacity as a program. We had ARPA funded roving coordinators. These were additional district coordinators, the folks that are determining whether a permit is required or not, and also helping shepherd through the folks through the permitting process. And we were able to hire those on permanently with the help of the legislature. We appreciate that support. We have one that's been in the role for a significant amount of time and one that is recently hired. So we're working on building that capacity. Also, we've got a new application form that's being launched as of the 15th of January, so coming right up. And that will hopefully the intent there is we really focus those updates on items that would help people through the application process. And it's not to say that it's simpler. It is still a very comprehensive. We've got 32 criteria that have to be addressed, but the idea there is that it's really outlining exactly what we need to see so that people know right in the front, okay, this is what I need to provide for that application. Then it can be reviewed more efficiently and go through the process in the long run much more efficiently. So that's the goal with that project. Lastly, I'll just say that we're continuing to monitor and work through our permitting case related to ARPA funds for ARPA funded projects. This could be anything from municipal infrastructure, 3-acre stormwater projects to certain housing projects as well. I would say the vast majority of the 500 plus projects that were ARPA funded that we were reviewing, most of those were not going through our process, but where they were, we were identifying them and moving them through the process.
Just quickly, does the state of Vermont and municipalities have to go through the Act 250 process?
It depends, but yes. The short answer is yes, but it does depend on the specifics of the project. So there is a disturbance threshold for state projects. Yeah.
Is that a lower threshold than private lands?
In a way, yes, because with state projects, it's a threshold of the acreage of disturbance versus the acreage that the parcel is that the project is on for other.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I would also say that if state or municipal entities are undertaking projects on, let's say, vacant land, it's based on having 10 acres of physical disturbance. And it's not very often that a municipality or even the state would undertake a project that has that scope. So it tends to be the properties that are already under Act 250 jurisdiction or the bigger infrastructure projects that would trigger Act 250. Yeah.
So with that kind of overview on Act 250, I'm going to turn it over to Janet for overview of Act 181 implementation.
So yeah, as Pete said, we started on January 27th, 2025, and have worked nonstop and will be very busy through this next year implementing Act 181, or Act 181 charges. We're going to talk about the Wood Products Manufacturers Report today, which was submitted in June. Kirsten will give you more detail on that. Yesterday, we presented on the appeals report to the House Environment and Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committees. We have begun the regional plan review process. We have looked at so far 3 drafts in the pre-application process. We are about to receive a 4th. We will be doing pre-application reviews for all 11 regional plans. And on top of that, we are going to start in a couple months receiving their final plan applications. And that process is more formal. It is a quasi-judicial process. And at some points during this year, regional planning commissions must have an adopted Act 181 compliant plan by the end of this year. We're going to be looking at 5 and 6 regional plans at once through the summer and into the actually right up to the end of the year. A couple of the regional planning commissions are adopting, their target adoption is December. So our reviews might even feed into 2027. Go ahead, Rep. Nelson.
And that would be the MVDA for my region.
Yes.
David Snedeker.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, yeah.
And I need to work with him more in the town of Derby, so I'm afraid the town of Derby is not jumping on board with the 1A, 1B the way they ought to. Really, I'm really concerned about it. This is the opportunity
Yeah,
to, this is the opportunity and
for the town to identify areas that would be eligible for Act 250 exemptions. Yeah.
I was before him again Monday night.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, we're gonna go over the town plan next year. Maybe you better do it now.
Well, they don't have to have a town plan that identifies these areas, and I'll show you in a little bit what they do need. They need to work with Snedeker and his staff
Yes.
for the regional plan, future land use map to reflect that, you know, they might have some areas that could have Act
I
250.
believe David is concerned as well, seeing he whispered in my ear.
Okay,
I'm going to suggest that we not spend too much time
okay.
Sorry.
on non-wood products manufacturing.
Okay.
And then,
I believe in a few minutes.
okay, and then finally, we are working on, or we've adopted guidance for Tier 1A applications from municipalities, so.
And not to say that that isn't of interest to everybody.
Right,
Right. And we can,
Have him back.
we can have them back and
and here is an example. So we have this map viewer that we're using to do the reviews of those future land use maps. And this is a depiction of mostly the Northwest region, a little bit of Chittenden County here. Both of those regions have come to us with their draft plans. So here is what we have left to do on the Act 181 implementation. We are asking for extensions to some of these tasks. It will not affect the implementation effective dates of Tier 3 for this ask for an extension. We are asking for an extension on the Tier 2 area report, except for the accessory on-farm business component, which we will still come to you next month with. And then there's a new criterion 8C, that addresses forest fragmentation and habitat connector natural resource. And we're working on the road construction jurisdiction guidance. That road construction jurisdiction, new road trigger will go into effect in July. We've talked about the regional plans. We also will, as a covered agency under the EJ law, we need to develop a community engagement plan. And so this board will be more engaging of the public overall, not just because of the environmental justice law, but because it's important for us to be more out there and present among all of the state, and not just a board that meets, in Montpelier and doesn't really have much contact with the rest of, with the citizens of the state. So interim housing extensions.
Just to highlight that too, having been with the previous board and now with this board, and no disparaging to the previous board, but this board is doing an amazing job reaching out and getting out there to the districts, to the greater state, and holding public meetings, et cetera. So I'm very proud of that.
And as Pete mentioned, there are interim housing exemptions that will be expiring as this new tiered structure takes effect. And then finally, in 2029, we are tasked with reporting back to the legislature on how this is all working. Oops, meant to just go forward. And I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten for wood products manufacturers recommendations that we made.
So the first report that the Land Use Review Board submitted concerned wood products manufacturing. And I think the next slide has the statutory charge.
Mm-hmm.
And the report was actually due mid-December prior to the board being seated, and work actually got underway, overseen by the Forest Parks and Recreation, and then rolled over to the new board when we got seated in January. And so Forest Parks and Recreation was very much an important partner and advisor to the board in its continued work on this. The statutory charge outlines that a stakeholder group is to be convened, which occurred. We gathered a very broad range of stakeholders. There's a list if you're interested. We tried to really cover the basis with industry contacts, state, municipal, et cetera. Couple consultants, actual wood products manufacturers, et cetera. It was a pretty big invitation that went out, and we had 2 half-day meetings. The group was to examine, the Act 250 permit process, specifically assess how the minor process is working. And as Pete touched on, the minor process is those applications that don't involve a hearing. So it's a permit process that's concluded without a hearing. If there's a hearing, it's referred to as a major. And, addressing whether or not there were specific shortcomings, challenges. The group could look at permitting holistically with respect to, A&R permits, municipal permits, et cetera, and potentially recommend some alternate framework for permitting for this sector. And the report was due, as I said, mid-December. We asked for an extension, which was granted, and it was filed end of June. So I think we sort of covered this.
Okay.
The methodology, basically what we did is Forest and Parks and ourselves undertook a pretty substantive review of Act 250 permit records for this sector. We did, we word searched our database, and we think we identified, all of them in the period of time since the minor process took effect and before that date. So we came up with 2 independent sets of detailed information about what had happened with each one of these wood products manufacturing Act 250 applications. And, we were looking at how long did it take, what were the specific challenges encountered, what types of permit conditions went in, Was it a minor versus a major? And we looked at, I think that the period of time was 2002 to 2017, which is when the minor took effect, and then 2018 to the sort of end period that was examined, which I think was like early 2025. We don't have a huge number of cases. So since 2018, there were a total of 14 applications through the early 2025 cutoff date. So it's roughly 2 a year. Most of them, roughly 2/3 were processed as minor applications, roughly 1/3 were done as majors. There were more majors for this category in comparison to non-wood products, and there were no administrative amendments. So that was interesting. We also sent out a very detailed survey. We wanted to compare this sector to kind of a general baseline of all Act 250 applicants. What might stand out in terms of feedback from people who had been through the process. We sent it out to the applicants. We didn't send it out to other participants. It was like primary applicant contact. And we got a pretty good responsiveness, and there's a detailed compilation of those survey results. Unfortunately, we didn't get survey results from this sector. Like the group that had gone out to the wood products manufacturers, we didn't get any survey response. So what we then did was we organized some evening meetings, inviting the sector in to have kind of a guided conversation and an interview, and board members, myself and another board member, ask some questions and see what information those contacts wanted to volunteer. And so we did glean information that was more sector specific that way. And so once we had all this information in hand, we had 2 long meetings with the stakeholder group. And it was sort of let's look at the information and think about, what do people think about how it is working and what we might do differently? How can we make it better to support this important, working land sector? And we had several draft reports that went around inviting everyone to comment on. We also had a public comment period and a board meeting that was held. I think we went to Randolph and, issued a press release. So we tried to be thorough and comprehensive in gathering input. And we came up with 10 specific recommendations. And the report is somewhat long, and it also includes a list of here's all the other things we examined that we're not recommending be advanced at this time, but we wanted to capture them in this document. So that's sort of like the end of the report. There's a whole section of, we looked at these things too, and it addresses in some cases why we're not recommending that they be advanced at this time. So the first thing, go ahead.
Just before you get into
Yes.
the 2 slides earlier, made me think, is there ever an effort to develop sort of reciprocity with the permitting? So, if you have an Act 250 permit and an A&R permit on water, they would say, well, we accept, because you've been through the same sort of scoping or engineering sort of studies.
Yes.
Except the sort of same.
Yeah, so there is an existing feature of Act 250 that's part of the existing Act 250 rules, Rule 19, that establishes that an applicant can rely on that other requisite, say A&R permit, as what Act 250 calls a presumption of compliance. So that is woven into the process, and the file review reveals the instance of, how many of these other ancillary permits are in play. This is, a sector that often triggers some, numerous, in some cases, other permits like MSGP stormwater discharge, or.
So that's the number 4. So
Yeah,
Kirsten will talk more about that in a moment.
yeah. Do you want to go back to, so, go ahead. Yeah, that's okay.
Truly heartbreaking to have to excuse myself at this time, but I will review this and also look forward to reaching out for future dialogue.
Anytime.
And I just want to say that Peter and Janet, I participated both online and in person, and I really appreciate your acknowledgement that the normal procedures of reaching out doesn't do justice to citizenry, and you get it, and I thank you for that. For example, the Morrisville one, my dear friend, Asha Wallace, very proud, they sent out a survey and they got 119, responses. Well, there were 27,000 constituents in that area. Well, that doesn't tell me that you've reached everyone. Particularly rural Vermont landowners are very, ignorance the wrong one, uninformed about the impacts of particularly tier 2 rules potential or tier 3. And it is critical that those property owners have access to you, the information. And I know you know that, so thank you in advance for those continued efforts.
Sorry you have to step out.
Yeah.
Well,
Not as sorry.
feel free to be in touch.
I will be thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe just by way of a quick remark about the rural factor as you're backing up. And likewise, start. And by the way, thank you so much for having us. I don't think we necessarily said that. We really appreciate being here and having the conversation. We did examine through the file review, where are these wood products manufacturing businesses located in the state? And they naturally, as one might imagine, they do tend to be located in the more rural areas. That's probably not a surprise. So, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, but we unfortunately we have lost a couple of committee members. We can run past 12, run as long as we have people in the room, I think. But if it may well be the case that we feel like it would be helpful to have you back to either go into more detail, or if we don't get through the entire presentation, that's always an option.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a lot of detail here. So I think what we'll do is kind of stick to maybe sort of 5,000 foot level and try to give you some maybe nuggets of interest. So the first item that the board is recommending in this report is some special targeted support for this sector. And it's some special guidance and fact sheet information compiled to help ensure that applicants from this sector and any stakeholder commissions are aware of some of the existing special benefits that are already in the statute that I think you're aware of, but it's the special parameters for hours of operation, relaxed requirements for primary soil mitigation, and a default minor process as a starting point. And in addition, this would encompass making known the availability of this feature of Act 250 that originates from existing precedent that's called Stony Brook, and that is particularly suitable to larger tracts of land that may in some cases be in managed logging or forestry use, or perhaps just some other use, and the project occupies only a smaller portion of the tract. An applicant can avail themselves of this feature and ask that the district commission, as part of an application, limit the applicability of the permit conditions to that subset of land. So this was seen as quite important. And we have put together the fact sheet and supplemental guidance, and we are in the process of coordinating, getting it finalized, put up on the website in coordination with ANR. So it's, 95% done. We will have that available soon. The second task that we recognize would have value is additional training, in-house and externally available. We have undertaken some initial internal training at our annual meeting this year, which was a great audience of many district commissioners, staff. And we're going to be continuing that after the new fact sheet and sector-specific supplemental guidance is finalized. ANR offered to make available, hey, you're back.
I politely dismissed my meeting.
Aw, yay. The Agency of Natural Resources made available to this sector some special permit coordination and regulatory support that it generally makes available and is limited to unique projects or large phased projects. So they are recognizing that this is important, and they are making known the availability of this special permit coordination through their Office of Planning and Policy. And we are also making sure that that is made known through our training fact sheet guidance. So we're sort of working with them to coordinate that effort.
Is that Act 250 permitting or the more holistic?
So it's both. It's ANR's offering to make sure that there's good support with respect to its own permits and with respect to the areas within Act 250 that are of interest to ANR. The next tasks that the board is committed to implementing under this report have to do with updating its rules. And this came out in the conversation with the stakeholders, that there are some areas of the rules where maybe people are seeing opportunities for efficiency, potentially expanded use of administrative amendments, or addressing the necessity of Act 250 permits in the first instance for things like, say, a 3-acre stormwater permit is triggered. So the board is committed to looking at those elements of the rules for the sector, but also as a component of our larger overall, rulemaking effort that we anticipate initiating later this year. So we've put a pin in this. We recognize the importance, and
For instance, there's some names of permits in ANR that are within our rules that don't correspond directly to the actual names of the permits that exist now. So that needs to be updated for sure.
Yeah.
This update and the others that you're recommending would be within your power to initiate?
Yeah, so we have to go through the rulemaking process.
Yes.
Yeah, they're Act 250 rules.
They're the Act 250 rules.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, are there questions about that?
Well, this gets to the question that came up earlier. You pointed to bullet number 4 as not a solution necessarily, but addressing that question of overlap and I'm not sure how you described it, John, but
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. Are there other questions about that?
One of the things I might mention, I mean, it's just kind of, again, this is like a limited data set of 14, roughly 2 a year wood products manufacturing permits that have occurred since 2018. But we were looking at, the process. What were the issues again? What were the other ancillary permits that came into play? And we did observe that there was so in terms of timeframe, one of the things that emerged was, I think it was 130 days in-house time average from the time the first part of an application arrived, which sometimes the commissions and staff are waiting for something else to arrive, like the check in the mail or the signature page. So we measured from, the day the thing first landed through our electronic application portal system to the time the decision was issued. The average was 130 days. We did throw out an outlier. There was one that the commission was waiting for several years for a stormwater permit that unfortunately had been issued but not filed with the commission. So we sort of set that one aside. It was an average of 130 days. And for a pretty significant percentage of them, I could tell you, there was a number of them that the commission waited on average, I think it was 89 or 90 days for receipt of other ancillary permits. Yeah, 43%. So 6 of the 14, the commission had everything it needed, but had to wait for receipt of those other permits before the Act 250 permit process could be concluded and that decision issued. So that was just kind of interesting considering that interplay.
Representative Nelson?
And those permits were coming from like ANR or for DRBs or whatever.
Just state permits.
Yeah, so the specific permits were from ANR, air pollution, there were two. Two of the 14 projects involved multi-sector general permit, which is a stormwater permit for industrial sites. Stormwater discharge, which is not necessarily specific to industrial, it's treatment of runoff from impervious hard surfaces. And then stormwater construction, erosion control permits. There were two of those. There was participation from other local and state agencies noted that's captured in the report as well. Vermont Division for Historic Preservation and Ag. So yeah, there's a lot of data here. I don't want to mire you in it. I'm just trying to find that balance and welcome any conversation.
Can I ask, and I was gonna ask first whether, how much of an impact you thought, like, number 4 there would have? And I'm thinking, are these 10 recommendations in any particular order? Like, let's make sure if we do nothing else, that we do number 1,
Yes,
which seemed like,
And number 1 is 95%
Yeah,
there.
they're not-
And,
yeah.
but they're not
They're not in an order of
prioritized.
prioritization.
No.
And number 4 could have a significant impact because, as I just mentioned, the district commission in 43% of the applications was waiting 99 days for receipt of those other permits. And if that time, if the Act 250 permit can be issued conditional upon receipt of those permits, or there's some other timeline, then that could be not insignificant.
and these Act 250 rules, do they need to go through the LCAR
Yeah.
Yes,
process still?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's not a legislative ask.
Right.
correct.
These aren't.
Right, but there are some ones that we'll get to in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Representative Nelson?
And to be fair to ANR, is some of their timeline to get the applicant the permit to get to you is because they're waiting for information maybe from the applicant?
Sure. Yeah, it's
Like
just,
sometimes you're waiting
Yes.
for information to.
yeah, it's all a process and
Which is why the previous, these first 3 could help in that regard,
Mhm.
better coordination between
Mhm.
the applicant and affected agencies in our program.
right, sort of strategic timing of approaching the permit
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you want to move?
Yeah,
to
I think,
this?
are we
Okay.
sort of, any other questions about the rulemaking it'll come through ICAR, LCAR?
Do you have an idea of the timeframe?
Well, I think we're generally planning to start that later this year.
Yeah, but we're still mired in rulemaking for 8C and for Tier 3. And we're still very busy with the 11 regional plans. So, yeah. And we're also going to start taking in Tier 1A applications this year, so.
Yeah.
Representative O'Brien?
I just wondered if there were, if there's ever sort of jurisdictional confusion or discussions between the PUC and the Nature Review Board over, I can imagine in this sort of area, if, say, Rygate wanted to, build some sort of facility to make product, to make energy, for example, like where would Act 250 permitting, I just know from the PUC, like from cell phone towers, they don't, in Tunbridge, they don't need an Act 250 permit. And I wondered sort of in this same field where wood products are being used in something, if there was vertical integration there.
Being used for energy production.
Exactly. When the PUC sort of jurisdiction stops and Act 250 permitting.
I don't think they don't overlap.
Yeah, I think it is distinct between the two.
So an energy plant, energy producing plant would be PUC.
But if it's the manufacturer of those wood products for that.
That's what I was.
That would be, that would
Yeah.
be that would be separate
Right.
and that would be within the Act 250
Right.
context, depending on the jurisdictional triggers, of course.
Yeah.
Representative Byrd?
Yeah, you mentioned the minor and major permits that are, is that kind of across the board within Act 250, there's like triggers for whether it's a minor or
Yeah,
major?
yeah.
And just a brief description of like, what are the differences? You mentioned a hearing, is that the primary difference or are there other differences?
Yeah, that's the primary difference, and it's often whether somebody asks for a hearing.
Yeah, occasionally the commission will set a hearing in motion on its own, but often it's because there's another participant or a party or some, question or issue that for which the commission establishes that process to hear from the parties and decide the matter. The one difference is that a minor permit process can't be appealed under current statute. Only the major decisions can be appealed. So that's quite important.
Mhm.
By either party, decision.
Correct.
Representative Lipson?
Thank you, Chairman. This is sort of a theoretical question, but it is important to know. Like everyone in this room, but I'm clearly an advocate for working lands, as our committee is about. Covers about 83% of the land covers either forest or agriculture. There's a very clear distinction. The federal USDA has been funding and supporting agricultural enterprises for decades with regard to water quality and many other critical supports. The forestry has not been the recipient. Vermont, because we have seen our capacity to process and manufacture wood products diminished by about 98% in my lifetime. And that's another complicated crisis. But until a year ago, and this committee supported and FPR supported the Vermont Forest Future Strategic Roadmap, supported, I'm on that implementation committee. Some supports for climate resiliency and water quality for hardening of either log landings or stream crossing and sort of thing. So that's a step in the right direction. But you should know how dire the barriers are, and it's not the Act 250 process, but there are these ancillary water quality, stormwater retention that have been a serious, and these are critical needs. I don't have a solution, but for a startup like in Fletcher, Vermont, if they had known what the end cost, and it would have built a mill and others. So could you, in your processing, if you think there's recommendations that you might have to reduce some of these barriers? Federal grants aren't expanding generally for anything right now, so it's hard to look for them. But that's a big factor in why the forestry and wood products are in crisis now in Vermont. So do you have any inputs?
I mean, I think that goes back to these first three again. And, having really affirmative sort of assistance and coordination between applicants and our program and A&R. Do you think, Kirsten, that would?
Oh, I think it will all help.
Yeah.
I do think the group heard some of that kind of feedback around this sector and other industrial sites, that it's the sum total of everything that can be a lot.
was gonna say, why don't we, let me take a quick time check here. Does anybody like need to rush out in the next 2 minutes? I don't want to keep people long into lunch and you as well, but maybe if we could just briefly walk through these last
Yeah.
three, and then with the understanding that we'll ask you back in
Yeah,
next week or
Great.
Sure.
when you have time.
Yeah,
And we know you're busy, as you just said.
I'm happy to come back anytime. The first, or item number 8 is advocacy for ombudsperson, permit specialist, someone to really provide general handholding. And this came up partly in the context of that there's essentially no longer permit specialists as a live body to provide that kind of direct support and assistance to the public in, across the state. There's this permit navigator tool, which is a great tool. You can access it online. But there's not
they're taking
it down, but there's a permit specialists are no longer there. So we, everyone I think there was recognition for the value of that as a service to support particularly applicants. And I saw that when I was still working as a coordinator. So that's the second, item number 9 has to do with basically tweaking the language in the legislation to align it with how it is worded for agriculture. Forestry, logging, and agriculture below 2,500 feet is not subject to Act 250 jurisdiction. And there is some specific language in the legislation that recognizes that if a piece of property is in farming use, that though the portions of the tract being used for farming are not regulated by Act 250. And stakeholders wanted to see a sort of a parallel language for logging forestry. So we have something 99% of the way ready to make available when that is of interest.
Not to interrupt.
Sure.
But I support your recommendation number 9, 100%. That is critical. And the lack of that really ripples fear. The forest economy.
You're very close to having a draft language, is that?
Yes.
Same.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Brooke Dingledine and myself have worked with our general counsel, and we have some language that's almost at the finish line.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that this doesn't invalidate existing Act 250 restrictions on tree cutting or preclude the district commissions from imposing restrictions that might be deemed needed to conform with some of the Act 250 criteria, like a no-cut zone along a stream buffer, or maybe there's some aesthetic buffering. So that we want to make sure that it's carefully worded to make sure that it doesn't run afoul of the Act 250 obligations. But we have something that we think, and we hope that, when people see it, they will be pleased with it. And then the last item has to do with a discovery that basically when these benefits for the sector were put into the statute in, I guess it was 2021, concerning hours of operation, the relaxed one-to-one prime ag mitigation, there was a definition put into the statute at that time for what is a wood products manufacturer. And I think it was done to allow those benefits to apply to this sort of broad range of all this stuff is wood products manufacturing, and that if you're that definition, then you get these benefits. So what happened was it captured basically log yards. And there had been prior to that a very long-standing interpretation and application that log yards, whether they be on the property being logged or perhaps elsewhere as a log staging area, sorting log yard, that those were part of logging. And there had been a declaratory ruling that I think is one of the exhibits that we located and we would suggest that that definition be modified to eliminate that wording so that the statute doesn't in sort of capture those as manufacturing facilities, basically as a commercial activity.
So they wouldn't
Yeah.
need
We're looking to
that.
restore that status that had predated the more recent legislation.
So this is the distinction between forestry operations and
Yeah.
everything else.
Wood products
Correct.
manufacturing, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably inadvertent that occurred. It's my
That would be a
guess.
fairly straightforward statutory fix.
Yes.
Taking out some words
Yes.
in a paragraph.
Yep.
Okay, good. Well, it sounds like then, yes, let's maybe give you whatever additional time you need to.
That's it. I
Program,
mean-
I was just gonna suggest maybe if I may, sorry to interrupt, but thinking that it might make sense, once we have some language to give to you all, you can mull this over as well as some of that language and such. And then we'd be happy to come back and talk that through.
When we come back
but-
in February, Kirsten, do you think that we have anything on this that we could bring with us to present as well?
On the
For-
statutory language?
Yeah, when we come back for reporting on recommendations for AOFBs, maybe we would have more to report on these issues.
Sure. We'd be happy to give an update then. That would be a great idea.
Just mindful of the legislative calendar and that we're on a sort of a hard deadline to move anything, fairly early
Yeah,
in the calendar year. And so I think we can talk more about that timing, but it might make sense for us to continue having a discussion, knowing what we now know. Thank you.
yeah,
And then we can check in with you when you've got,
okay.
more that you'd like to add. Good. All right. Thank you. And thanks everybody for staying a little bit late. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we are done for the day, committee, and back with our usual Tuesday morning schedule on the floor, and then Tuesday's a little bit different. I think,
Yeah.
we can